This is it, the final round of the 2021 South African Cross Country Series. As in recent years, the season ended in Parys on the banks of the Vaal River. And if that sounds like a holiday, you'd be sorely mistaken, as there was a lot that went down at the final round. All the action is proudly brought to you by Toyota, Ural, Ford and Pirelli. The final roll of the dice for 2021 saw the SACCS crews congregate at the Parys airfield for the last round of the year. Some familiar faces were missing, however, as several crews elected to sit out the final round as they prepared for the upcoming Dakar Rally. That, and also some of them had already sewn up the title in their respective classes, so time to either sit back and relax or try something new. We'll get to that in a moment, but first let's talk about Nasser Al-Attiyah. The Qatari superstar was in South Africa for the introduction of Toyota Gazoo Racing's new Hilux T1 Plus and would be taking part in the TGRSA Parys 400.
Yeah, I am really happy to be here, fantastic people, landscape is nice, and we are quite happy, to come here and to test also the new car, for next Dakar. Yeah, thanks for all the support from South African people.
Al-Attiyah and Bumel wouldn't be able to score points in the race as the TGR DKR T1 Plus runs 2022 FIA specs. However, it would be great to see the star take on the route alongside our regular SACCS crews. Talking of which, let's take a moment to scope the lay of the land when it comes to the championship standings prior to the final round. The fight for Class FIA honours was a three-horse race all year, with Lottachan, Woolridge and Baragwanath trading blows at the top. The CR6 driver would be sitting out the final round, however, leaving Lottachan and Woolridge to slug it out in the Free State. Class T was a bloody battlefield in 2021, but it was Malcolm Koch who took the crown with 1 round to spare. The burly Freiburger opted to put his feet up for the final round though, leaving the rest of the field to fight over the scraps. Over in Class A, Lance Trathuri had made mincemeat out of his competition this year, and with the title in the bag, he decided to try his hand at something different in Parys. He'd be behind the wheel of the Century CR6 for the first time, and was looking forward to the experience. Class P was a quiet place in 2021, with only 4 different crews taking the starters' orders. Willem de Tooy was a whisker in front of Daniel Retief after 6 rounds, but with neither of them in attendance in Parys, the title would go the way of Keith McInerney. And finally, Class G had the Lanis as already decided champs, so the action at Parys would be all about second place in the title fight. With the bulk of the season's titles done and dusted then, the only man who could potentially rain on Henk Lottachan's parade was Ford's Lance Woolridge, partnered with the ever-alluring Alvin Vonk. The Italian was just 9 points behind the Toyota Gazoo Racing SA driver with 1 race to go, so it was all or nothing for the man in blue.
Yeah, I think Henk's got a sort of an easier path to the championship, and we're safe in second. So we've got to just go do our race, see where the cards fall with the rest of the field, and what will be will be.
At the same time, recently crowned Class A winner Lance Trathuri would be making his national debut for Class FIA. The burly man from Natal had swapped his open wheeler for a Century CR6 in Parys, and he was relishing the chance to put the big beast through its paces.
Yeah, it's good. I'd just like to thank Julian from Century for hooking us up with this car for today. And we did some testing last weekend. Adrian flew down, and it's good. I'm looking forward to today.
It was almost go time in Parys, but before the flag could drop for the start, there were some final formalities to take care of. As has become tradition, the SACCS assists with the distribution of school shoes to children in the area in which the races take place, and the TGRSA Parys 400 was no exception. And with that, it was go time in Parys. This was the only one-day event on the calendar, with both qualifying and the 2 racing loops taking place on the same day. As such, the Pirelli qualifier would take place over just 15 kilometers, a short, sharp sprint to determine the starting positions for the 2 main loops. Those loops of 175 kilometers would form the meat of the race, with crews negotiating a wide variety of terrain types, from fast gravel tracks and tough rocky sections to long straights past mealie fields. But enough about the weekend. Let's go racing. Two cars that drew huge attention in Parys were the newly minted Class T1 Plus Toyota Hiluxes of Nasser Al-Attiyah and Janil de Villiers. Neither car would be eligible to score points, but the monstrous machines with their big wheels captivated the crowds, and the opportunity to see Al-Attiyah and his French co-driver Matteo Boumel in action was a rare treat indeed. And the visitors failed to disappoint. They blitzed the 15-kilometer qualifier, setting the fastest time by 9 seconds, whilst teammates de Villiers and co-driver Dennis Murphy went third fastest on the opener.
The prologue was not easy for everybody, but okay, we did really good time, you know, and just we try to enjoy and to make a more kilometer for the new car, you know, to prepare for Dakar.
In Class G, Jeff Minnaert and Gerrit Sneeman are heading to Dakar in January, and the pair had already secured a victory earlier on in the season. They continued their good form, going third fastest in the Pirelli qualifying race, just 16 seconds behind the crew in second. That honour belonged to young Ken Rutherford and his co-driver, Cabello Macchignani, who have also shown moments of brilliance this season. But the top step of the podium belonged to Werner Mostert, who has possibly recorded more side-by-side pole positions than any other crew. He had Chris Visser Jr. reading the notes for the Parys 400, and the former champion was more than ecstatic to be back at the top of the racing action. Class P had only the one crew in the form of Keith and Andrew McInerney. The pair went at a good clip despite not facing any competition and completed the 15-kilometer qualifier in 11 minutes and 35 seconds. And then there were the crews in Class A of the special vehicle category. The monstrous machines were not only exciting to watch, but also deceptively quick. In Parys, the top three were split by just 12 seconds, with Loert de Pria and Tian Swart set in the third fastest time. They had John Thompson and Maurice Matten ahead of them in second, whilst the qualifying win went to Bullabuertas and Jay Pretorius in their King Price Extreme Porter. The pair pipped Thompson and Zamatten by a single second, but held the psychological advantage going into the main event.
It went well out there today, and we're going to try and keep it up.
In the production category, it was Dylan Venter and Vince van Alleman who went third fastest in Class T, some 32 seconds behind the winners of the qualifying race. Ahead of them, Vos Prinsloo and Andre Vermeulen were 18 seconds slower than the winners, but clearly in with a shout. Whilst the Horn brothers brought their Gifpijl home in first place in their quest to end the season on a high. The Motherland Toyota Hilux crew are multiple former champions, but their 2021 season has been largely disappointing. A win on the qualifier, however, put a bit of a bob back in the step of Johan Horn.
But the points are very close. So yeah, we're going to give our best all out today and see what happens.
And finally, on to the big boys and the lads at the sharp end of the field, campaigning their fearsome Class FIA machines. Remember, these cars all conform to the FIA regulations for the Dakar Rally, and as such, represent the pinnacle of the current generation of cars. Frighteningly fast, extremely powerful, and built like the proverbial brick house. The battle in Class FIA is always a tight one, but with the title still undecided, the TGRSA Parys 400 was always going to be a bloodbath. As ever, it was red versus blue, Toyota versus Ford. Ladegan and Cummings held the advantage coming into the final round, but a win for the Ford crew would require a strong second place from the Toyota crew, and it all started with the qualifying race. In the end, the top four spots were eventually split between Toyota and Ford, with TGRSA's Shamir Varioa and Donnie Statson taking fourth spot by 12 seconds. They had the Ford of Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer 7 seconds ahead of them, and then came the two title contenders. Lance Woolridge and Alvin Vonk threw the kitchen sink at the qualifier, but still finished 3 seconds behind their arch rivals. This meant that Henk Ladegan and Brett Cummings took pole by all of 3 seconds, but with a battle this close, literally every second counted. So let's briefly recap those results from the Pirelli qualifying event. In Class FIA, it was Ladegan and Cummings on top, with Woolridge and Vonk scant seconds behind, a tasty battle looming. The second Ford in the hands of Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer was just 2 seconds further adrift. Class T saw the Horn brothers dominate yet again, with Vos Prinsloo and Andre Vermeulen in second, and Dylan Venter and co-driver Vince van Alleman in third. Again, another fierce battle was on the cards in the Class Ts. With Chathui now campaigning in Class FIA, the qualifying victory in Class A went to Bertus and Pretorius, with John Thompson and Zamatin in second place, just a single second back. Dupria and Swat completed the qualifying podium, some 11 seconds further back in third. The Macanettis were the only runners in Class P, but the brothers recorded a competitive time of 11 minutes and 35 seconds. And in Class G, Werner Mostert was back in his usual spot, now with Chris Visser Jr. reading the notes. Rutherford and Makinyani were in second place, with Minnaert and Snyman wrapping up the qualifying podium. And that wrapped up qualifying at the 2021 TGRSA Parys 400, the final round of the season. Join us again after the break for more action from the Free State. Welcome back to Parys, the one in the Free State, on the banks of the Vaal River for the final throw of the dice in the 2021 South African Cross Country Championship. So far, we've had a short qualifying race, but the Toyota Gazoo Racing Parys 400 was already shaping up to be a cracker of a series finale. Spectators who came out were treated by the presence of Dakar royalty in the form of Nasser Al-Attiyah and Matteo Baumel, who were putting their brand new Toyota Hilux DKR T1 Plus through its paces, whilst the overall title fight between Ford's Lance Woolridge and Alvin Vonk and Toyota's Henk Ladekan and Brett Cummings had to be settled on this very day. On the cards were nearly 400 kilometers of rough bushveld tracks comprised of two identical loops with a mandatory 30-minute service break in between. As always, the qualifying race once again opened up a can of worms as it's used to determine the starting order for the real race. You don't want to lose too much time, but you also don't necessarily want to be the first car out on virgin tracks. But this didn't bother Nasser Al-Attiyah and Matteo Baumel. The Qatari driver only had one thing on his mind, and that was to drive the new Hilux as fast as possible. 2 minutes after him, it was time for Henk Ladekan and Brett Cummings to drop the hammer in their Hilux. They were followed by yet another teammate in the form of Janelle de Villiers, with Dennis Murphy reading the notes in their new Dakar Hilux. Remember, both Al-Attiyah and de Villiers weren't officially competing in the actual race, as the new T1 Plus car does not conform to 2021 Class FIA regulations worldwide. Of what a world-class championship we have in South Africa, as these guys use the opportunity to prepare themselves and the new car for January's Dakar race in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Back to the race and the title fight between Ladekan and Lance Woolridge, who together with Alvin Vonk in the Ford Castrol Cross Country Ranger was the next to get their race underway. Woolridge had backup in the form of his teammate and brother Gareth Woolridge in the second Castrol Ford Ranger, just 2 minutes behind him. Next up, another of the Toyota Gazoo Racing SA Hilux Buckies, this one driven by Shamir Variawa and Donnie Stassen, who were closely followed by Chris Visser and Albertus Venter. Irvin Besson and Gerrit Skitter in their Red Lion VK56 were the next ones to tackle the Parys 400, just ahead of big man Lance Chathui and Adrian Rutz, who made their debut appearance in Class FIA behind the wheel of the Century CL6. Let's fast forward the stopwatch to past the halfway mark of loop number 1, and a clear picture was emerging. As can be expected, the visiting pairing of Nasser Al-Attiyah and Matteo Baumel found the going tough here in the Free State, as they were the ones leaving a pair of tracks for the others to follow. But only for the first hour or so, because soon after that, defending champions Henk Ladekan and Brett Cummings overtook their teammates to lead the race and open the road.
We caught Nasser maybe like halfway through the loop, but he was really nice. He pulled over for us, so you could see us coming.
They were closely followed by de Villiers and Murphy, who of course weren't in the race, but Gareth Woolridge definitely was. The Ford driver managed to move up the ranks and into second position, just 30 seconds behind race leader Ladekan. The name of Visser was the next on the leaderboard at this early part of the race, but on the road, he was now stuck in the dust of Variawa and Stassen ahead of him. And through all of this, Lance Woolridge and Alvin Vonk had a mountain to climb, as the gap between him in the current 4th position and his title rival Ladekan up ahead in first was increasing and stood at just over 2 minutes at this vital part of the race. Let's move on now to Class T, the class for South African-built buckies for South African drivers who don't necessarily have Dakar aspirations just yet. This is another battlefield where a string of Ford Rangers have to fend off a few Toyotas. Freiburg businessman Malcolm Koch already claimed the title during the previous round and elected to sit out the final race here in Parys, meaning it was up to the likes of Horst Prinsloo and Andre Vermeulen in their NWM Ford Ranger to fight it out with former class champions Johan and Werner Horn in the Malalan Toyota Racing Hilux. The Horns put their Gifpail in pole position, but lost the lead early on when the aging Hilux started to develop a few technical niggles. This was the only invite that the rapid Vos Prinsloo needed. The Ermelo businessman is a quick driver, and with the experience of Andre Vermeulen reading the notes, the NWM Ford Ranger disappeared off into the distance on their way to a commanding Class T victory. With the Horns now completely removed from the action, it was up to the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux of Dylan Fenter and Vince van Alleman to take the fight to the Fords, and fight they did. The younger of the Fenter brothers did a good job and at one stage was very close to the leading Ford of Prinsloo, but he too lost some time later on and slid down the rankings into third place. This meant that Christo Rose and Arno Olivier maintained their 100% finishing record in 2021 after moving up into production car racing following a stint in Class Gs of the special vehicle category the year before. The NWM Ford Ranger completed the race in second position in Class T to claim yet another podium behind Prinsloo and ahead of Fenter, who reached the end in a fine third place. The Neil Woolridge Motorsport development squad of Bapi Rabaluza and Fane Maiwa missed out on a podium position here in Parys, but added another finish to round off their debut season in the very competitive world of cross-country racing. And after enduring 2 flat tyres and losing more valuable time with a broken jack, the third NWM Ford Ranger of Bernard Johnston and Jan Harm Hugo were also forced to call it a day. That's how things turned out in the very competitive Class T of the production vehicle category, but what about the guys and girls who competed in the 3 different classes that make up the special vehicle category? Well, one thing was for sure, Class A would definitely see a new winner as champions Lance Trathui and Adrian Roots have now moved up into Class FIA, leaving the top step open for whoever wanted it the most. Scott Berger and Henk Janssen van Vuren would have been keen to finish their last race before taking on the Dakar in January, but the King Price Extreme Bat crew was forced to retire. And so was the unfortunate Nick Pienaar and Carl Swanepoel. The former off-road bike racer also failed to finish his third race in the category thanks to fuel pressure problems and a broken alternator. So these were the remaining warriors in Class A, the ones that would end up on the podium, but in which order? The protagonists? John Thompson and Marisa Matten, wife and husband Sandra Labskotny-Jonk and Jaco Jonk in the Tuscany Bat Viper, Billa Buertas and Jay Pretorius in the King Price Extreme Porter, and Louis Dupria and Tian Swart in the Farmers Meat Striker. Thompson unfortunately lost valuable time as he dropped out of the podium battle, but there were quite literally only mere minutes separating the top 3 crews for the majority of the race, with the lead changing several times. In the end, it was Sandra and Jaco who reached the end with a total time of 4 hours and 47 minutes. It was fast, but just not fast enough to claim second position, as Louis Dupria and Tian Swart managed to reach the race finish line in a time of 4 hours and 45 minutes. It was, however, not plain sailing for either of them, with Sandra overcoming a few mechanical issues to step onto the podium for the first time this season, while Dupria lost power steering late on in loop number 2. And how about this adventure for Billa Buertas and Jay Pretorius? The brakes failed in loop 1, causing them to drive through a fence. The King Price Extreme Porter even rolled onto its roof at one point, but was turned right side up by a few helpful spectators. And the crew went on to claim their second victory in Class A and the second victory on the bounce. Unfortunately for the popular McAnally brothers, Keith and Andrew, they were the only ones entered into Class P of the special vehicle category, but fortunate for the crew, they managed to safely reach the finish line in their bat and would end on the top step of the podium for their efforts. And on to Class G we go. This was where it all starts for many of the aspiring drivers in the world of cross-country racing. This is where you learn about the ups and downs, but here in Parys for the final round of the 2021 championship, there were far more downs than ups. In fact, out of the 6 crews that started the race, only 1 managed to reach the finish. After only competing in the season opener, Peter Walter and Sean de Villiers made a very welcome comeback in the Class G side-by-side championship with their Can-Am Maverick and went on to win the class. The TGRSA Parys 400 took no prisoners, as the other 5 teams fell by the wayside. Vernon Mostert and Chris Visser Jr. in their King Price Extreme Can-Am Maverick were leading the side-by-sides after the qualifying race, but were time-barred after they broke a wheel bearing on the first loop, while the 19-year-old duo of Kent Rutherford and Cabello Macagnani, Theo Erasmus and Edward Odendahl, and Jeff Minott and Gerrit Snyman all failed to complete the Free State event. And so too did Basil Besadenhout alongside Rickers Hutting, who broke a ball joint in the first loop, and attempts to repair were unsuccessful. Here it is, confirmation of how the final race in 2021 ended for those in the special vehicle category, who managed to reach the end of a very tough Parys 400. And for the second time in as many events, the names of Bula Boertes and Jay Pretorius ended at the top, ahead of Luot de Priya and Tian Swart, with Sandra Labiskakny-Jank and husband Jaco, who stepped onto the podium for the first time in 2021. Racing stalwarts John Thompson and Marisa Matten finished in fourth. The McAnetties first finished first in Class P, whilst Peter Walter and Sean de Villiers did exactly the same thing in Gs for the side-by-sides. A tough day at the office for most of the guys and girls in the special vehicle category, and the final taste of victory champagne for the season. After surviving the race, it was safe to say that Peter Walter was more than simply happy.
It takes a lot of concentration to keep those cars on the road and not hit the rocks. So no, it was a good day.
The McAnetty brothers were the only ones on the Class P podium, but they sure deserved the finish.
Difficult race today too. We had a hard first lap.
A full podium for the Class A competitors, and no one deserved to stand on the top step more than Bula Boertes and Jay Pretorius. Here's the big man with the story.
I think it's Lady Luck was on her side, and some of the local farmers helped us on the wheels again, and when the car's on the wheels, they said just get going again.
On now to the final battles at the front of the field, where not only the outcome of the race still had to be decided, but also the outcome of the entire championship. So how did it all pan out on that final loop? It started very well for Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer, whose Castrol cross-country Team Ford Ranger was less than half a minute behind race leaders Henk Ladegan and Brett Cummings at the start of the final loop. But it all ended abruptly when their Ranger rolled end over end on a rough section. Fortunately, neither driver nor co-driver were hurt, and the car was hardly damaged, but it was the end of their race and their season. Meanwhile, Chris Visser and Albertus Venter were also on a charge in their Toyota Hilux and had moved to within a few seconds of the Toyota Gazoo Racing SA Hilux of Shamir Variawa and Donnie Stassen. The Freiburg farmer was eager to get past, and in an effort to overtake, they struck a huge rock that was obscured by the dust. The car rolled heavily, bringing their race to a premature end, but once again, both driver and co-driver were unharmed in the incident. The list of retirees was now growing fast, and soon the names of Richard Leake and Zahir Badania, Clint Weston and Henry Kuna, and Gary Bertholdt and Siegfried Rousseau were added to that list, all failing to find the finish. They didn't have to feel too bad though, as multiple Dakar winners Nasser Alatia and Matteo Bumel also joined the list. The Qatari has probably never seen barbed wire fences before, but he had a long one wrapped around the front axle of his new Hilux and decided to stop in an effort to preserve the vehicle. So who did finish the tough Parys 400? Let's count them down. Dubai-based businessman Thomas Bell and Wade Harris reached the end in their Redline Motorsport VK56, but missed out on a top 10 finish, as 10th place belonged to Redline teammates Philip Buerta and Roelof Jens van Vuren, who finished every event in their debut season. Buerta was around 5 minutes slower than the 9th place Dierwold van Breda and Johan de Toy in their Potch Plastic CR6. The Redline Revo, driven by Conrad Rautenbach and Rian Kreiling, came home 8th place, just 21 seconds behind the Motonetics KEC Racing Renault Duster of father and son, Johan and Sean van Staden. The van Stadens, in turn, very nearly finished in 6th, as only 17 seconds separated them from Eben Besson and Gerrit Skitter. The pair has really been impressive in Besson's debut year in the sport. The Redline VK56 even survived a little rollover and still managed to cross the line in a solid 6th position. And what a Class FIA debut by current Class A champions Lance Trethrui and Adrian Ruetz, who raced the monstrous CR6 buggy for the first time. The big man did a sterling job to record a 5th place finish, less than a minute behind the car in front up the road in 4th. This car was the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux of Jason Venter and Jaco van Aert. Venter is a former Class T champion and a quick driver, but luck has not been on his side this year so far. So the 4x4 Mega World crowd would have been super pleased in the way that their tough season ended here in Parys. Shamir Variawa and Donnie Stassen will also be going to Dakar in January, so the Toyota Gazoo Racing SA squad would have been pleased with their form as they reached the finish line with the 3rd fastest time. But the pairing received a 20-minute penalty related to the Chris Visser incident. At the time of going to print, the penalty was contested and the official results are not yet final. So we were left with this, and how fitting that the fight for the Parys 400 victory was also the fight for the overall 2021 South African cross-country title. In the blue corner, Lance Woolridge and Alvin Vonk, Ford Castrol cross-country racing ranger. And in the red corner, Henk Lateghan and Brett Cummings, Toyota Gazoo racing SA Hilux. It was a fantastic and clean fight between these two crews all year long, with both teams earning each other's respect. But in the end, defending champions Lateghan and Cummings were just too fast for their rivals, with Lateghan taking the victory on the day, as well as the crown for 2021. Around 5 minutes the difference between first and second in the title fight, with Lateghan coming out on top over Woolridge. On this set of results, Venter got elevated up to third thanks to Variawa's penalty, followed by Trethui and Besson. And there we see the names of Vos Prinsloo at the top of the Class T rankings, taking the final victory of the year ahead of Christo Rose and Dylan Venter, taking the final step of the podium. And this was the final podium celebration of 2021. The Class T winners Vos Prinsloo and Andre Vermeulen were loving it.
Yeah, today was a good day for us. Only had one flat tire and the rest was smooth sailing.
And this is what 2021 SA cross-country champion Henk Lateghan had to say after spraying the bubbly from the top step for the final time.
It's been an amazing year with Brett, with Toyota, with Gazoo Racing. It's really been something special.
And that was that for the 2021 SACCS. Join us next year for the next installment in this great motorsport drama. All the action was officially brought to you by Toyota, Ural, Ford and Pirelli.